This is Back to Back.
Hey, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willie Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my show, my podcast, whatever you want to call it. This is it. You're listening to it. How you doing? How was your weekend? My weekend was fucking great. I was out in Minneapolis doing a very exclusive wedding DJ set. That is officially the rare, and I wouldn't do that for almost anybody, but it was actually the producer of this show, my longtime friend and business partner, Conrad, who is getting married. So congratulations again, Conrad. That shit was so much fun. I was out there with my homie Diamond Pistols, who was a former guest on this show. If you haven't listened to the Diamond Pistols episode yet, it's really good. So go back and check that one after you listen to this episode. And man, we just had such a good time. A wedding on a boat in Minneapolis in the summer. I hope you guys had a good one too. I hope you're feeling great after Labor Day. And man, do I have a great show for you guys today. My guest on the show is none other than Wolfgang Gartner. I'm really fucking excited for this one. You guys, this is a legend of dance music coming on the show. And Wolfgang has a new single coming out in 3 days from the release of this podcast, Friday, September 8th. It's called Dubplate 99, and it's coming out on his label, Kindergarten Records. And we had one of my favorite conversations that I've maybe ever had on this show. I was just blown away. He's maybe one of the best examples of how to have a long, successful career in the music industry, how to be adaptable, how to predict what's coming, how to play to your strengths, how to shore up your weaknesses, basically everything. I'm not going to go into it too much because you guys are going to hear it all, but stay tuned because this is a good one. If you're a new listener, first-time listener, or just coming back to the show after taking a little break, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Just click that little subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to. If you're on SoundCloud, just follow the Back to Back account. That way, every time we post a new episode, it's just going to pop right up onto your device, your computer, your phone, your iPad, your Zune. Actually, I don't even think you could get this on a Zune. But if you are listening on a Zune, shout out to you for hacking your Zune, because that's pretty tight. And once you've subscribed, if you want to be super nice, leave us a review, especially if you're listening on iTunes. Just give us a quick rating and a review. That helps us out a ton. It takes like 10 seconds, and it really actually does help the show. It means a lot to us. And the last couple weeks, we've been doing a fun little experiment, and it's been working really well. We're going to keep rolling with it. I don't know, at least for this week, maybe a little longer. If you have an artist who you think would be a cool guest, a great person to talk to on this show, what I want you to do is send them a tweet, and tweet at me too, so include both of us on the message and just tell them you should be a guest on the Back to Back podcast. We've had a lot of people sending out tweets the last couple weeks, and I've actually been getting some responses from some of these artists you guys are talking to. So it's working, guys. I'm having a lot of fun seeing who you want to come on the show, and you never know. If you send one out, you might just hear your favorite artist on the show in the future. So keep hitting them up. Let them know they should come on the show. Tweet at them and at me. And yeah, we're going to keep this rolling because I love hearing from you guys. All right, so let's get into today's episode with Wolfgang Gartner. I went out to his studio in LA to record this, and I had never met him before. This is actually the first episode where I talked to somebody I had literally never met before in my life. The first time. So I was a little nervous. I didn't know how it was going to be. He ended up being just a great dude. Really easy to talk to, such an interesting guy. I think he and I share some personality traits. We kind of just locked in really early on in the conversation. We talked for longer than we were scheduled to, and he has the most epic career. If you know anything about dance music, you know about Wolfgang Gartner, but I didn't know half of the whole story of his career. We talk about all the new music he's got coming out. He's got a new single soon called Dubplate 99. It's coming out this Friday, September 8th, on his own label, Kindergarten Records. And I think this is one of the most valuable conversations I've had with anyone. Wolfgang Gartner, at one point in his career, was one of the biggest DJs, certainly in the country, and still a legend to this day. And hearing someone with that perspective, someone who's really operated at the highest levels of this game, you can't get that anywhere else. And we really get into it. I don't want to go too crazy hyping this up because I think once this starts, you guys are just going to understand what I'm talking about. So let's get into it right now. This is me and Wolfgang Gartner back to back. Let's go.
I grew up in California and I lived here till I was 21, and then I moved to Austin, Texas for almost 7 years. And then came back.
Where in California were you born? Where'd you grow up?
St. Louis Obispo.
What is that like? I've never been there.
It's halfway, for people that don't know, it's halfway approximately between Los Angeles and San Francisco on the coast.
Okay.
So I actually grew up in a town called Los Osos, which is, it's not a city, it's a town or municipality, and it's basically a suburb of San Luis Obispo. The population of my town where I grew up is 11,000, 12,000 people,
so
and
pretty small.
And it's right on the ocean. Like you can see the beach from my parents' deck where I grew up, and like we used to go to the beach weekly, and it's just it's like a really quiet like beachside California town with a really small population.
Yeah.
A lot of retired people. Not somewhere that's really fun to grow up.
I was going to say, I feel like that's one of those places where either you would just live a quiet seaside life and be happy, or you would be bored as shit and get into trouble.
I got into a lot of trouble because there was nothing to do.
Right.
But I still have nostalgia for it, and I still love going back there to visit my parents, and it's somewhere I'd like to, like retire eventually.
Okay, so it's still a nice place.
I love it. Yeah, it's like one of the nicest places in the world still to me.
What did your parents do?
They're both self-employed. My mom runs her own. She's a physical therapist, and she ran her own physical therapy business for a long time. She actually just retired, I think, last year.
Oh wow!
And then my dad is he's a gemstone cutter, so he goes to like foreign countries like Tanzania for Tanzanite and Sri Lanka for I forget what, and Brazil and all over the world, and buys like rough gems at the mines, like goes out to the bush and goes to the mines, and kind of like dangerous stuff actually. The last place he went was Madagascar, and like they tried to like rob him and steal all his stones, and he had to bribe people and escape from his hotel at like 4 a.m. because a bunch of like gemstone robbers were coming to get him. So,
and this is at age what? Like
he's 71, dude, and he won't quit, and he doesn't even need the money anymore, but he just loves it. So I think he just likes the adventure. So
I was gonna say, I mean, at that point, you're probably just addicted to the adrenaline.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, he needs. We tell him he needs a hobby. He needs like something to do. I mean, he can't seem to he'd get this quest for adventure out of his system.
His
even to
need
71.
for gems.
Yeah.
So what was your early experiences with music? Were you playing instruments growing up?
Yeah, it started with the piano when I wish I could remember. Whatever the youngest age that parents put their kids into piano lessons at, whatever that is, that was when I went in. So probably
pretty
like maybe
young,
6 or something,
like
really young. And I did that for probably 7 years. Got really good at classical piano, and to the point where I was playing in like competitions where they judged you, and like I was winning the competitions, and I could play really complex stuff,
like ahead of your level.
Oh yeah. Looking back on it and listening to it or watching a video of it now, I'm like, how did I do that? Like I don't have those skills anymore.
Isn't that kind of a sad thing too? If like I played the trumpet growing up, and I wasn't quite that good, but I was pretty good. I was like the lead trumpet in the band and all that.
Yeah.
And now I'm terrible. I just suck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I kept enough of it to be able to like play. I still have. I think the most important part of playing piano is what's called fingering, which is knowing which ones of your fingers to place on keys, and
Right.
depending on how many notes are in the chord, knowing which fingers to put on which notes, and how many fingers you have available, and then transitioning your fingers.
It's like a maximizing efficiency kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and it's really basically the flow of playing piano with two hands, and I managed to keep most of that, so I still use that. And then from basically the reason I quit piano lessons was I heard dance music for the first time when I was 11. I heard it
Oh, that's pretty young. How did you hear it at that age?
on a gemstone trip with my dad in Tanzania. We were in Tanzania, and one of his colleagues was his business partner's nephews was this Welsh kid who was he was like 16 and I was 11, and he was into dance music, and it was tapes back then, so he had his Walkman and a bunch of tapes, and I had my Walkman and my tapes of whatever music I was listening to back then, which I think was just like generic, I don't know,
Whatever was on the radio.
Yeah, and then he showed me this tape, and it was a compilation called Dance 93, and it had Inner City Good Life on it.
Yeah.
And that was the song. It also had a bunch of Ace of Base on it, which turned me on to I got to turn on to Ace of Base simultaneously with like true house music at the same time.
Someone else I was just talking to, Ace of Base was like a big reference for them as a kid.
They were a big one for me. I had posters of them all over my walls.
I mean, I
and
loved
shit.
them too.
Yeah. That's kind of how I learned how to like be a producer. Was I would recreate Ace of Base songs, because they tell you one of the best ways to learn how to do this is to actually recreate the song. So I was literally remaking Ace of Base songs in my little home studio, which was just it started with a Casio keyboard from Costco, but it had MIDI on it. And so all I needed was a drum machine, and I got that for my birthday. And then I think I had enough money from like my grandparents and doing chores and whatever to buy a 4-track tape recorder. And that was my first production setup, was a Casio keyboard with MIDI synced with a Roland drum machine.
Wow.
And then going to a 4-track, and I had a microphone, and then I would do vocals on it.
What age was this?
That was 11.
Holy shit, that's pretty impressive for an 11-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And then basically every Christmas or anytime that I could like get a present or like anything from my parents at that age, because I was too young to work, I would just ask for some kind of piece of gear in like a few $100s range. And I think the next thing I got was a Juno. Like we found a used Juno for $300. That was my first analog synth. And then by the time I was like 13, 14, I started working on jobs and stuff and making enough money to buy more gear. At that time, there was no real computer involvement in it besides just sequencing.
Because this is the 90s,
Yeah,
right?
this is the 90s.
Yeah.
That like Cubase and real like VSTs and all that stuff didn't really come into play until the very late 90s, early 2000s. So I had a computer with a program called Master Tracks Pro that I sequenced everything in, but all the sounds were made on drum machines, the sampler, synthesizers, and all that.
So, I mean, what was the impetus at age 11? Like, did you have other friends who were interested in it?
No. I was literally the only person at all of my schools, in junior high, in elementary school, in high school, the only person that was into music production, that was into dance music.
Wow.
I was the only person, especially since it was such a small town.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I remember, I think we're about the same age, and I definitely, in middle school and high school, interested in rave music, but yeah, it was very much not only was it not a cool thing, but it just wasn't a thing people even knew what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, for you, did it just come from somewhere inside, that drive to...
That was it. It was just that, honestly, it was that one song. It was Inner City Good Life that just sparked it.
Which is an all-time classic song.
It is. I listened to it over and over and over. And then I started taking the bus into San Luis Obispo, into the bigger city for me. And I would take the bus during the summer when I didn't have school. It was like a 45-minute bus ride. And I would walk to the record store. And I didn't even really have enough money to buy CDs.
Right.
But they had listening stations. And I would just sit at the record store and listen to like dance compilations and DJ mixes and stuff all day.
And that's kind of how you educated yourself.
That's how I did it. And then not drove back home, but took the bus back home. And
wow.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even afford to buy the CDs at that time. So I was just like taking a bus to go listen to music and come back home.
Right. What was life outside of music like at that time? I mean, were you a good kid in school? Were you a popular kid, weird kid?
I was I was definitely not a popular kid. I was not really a weird kid. I just was antisocial, and I'm super introverted, and I always have been. I was even more so back then.
Yeah.
I've kind of got over it a little bit now.
I mean, you're forced to a little bit.
You're forced to, especially in this job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was super introverted. Like in junior high school, I produced the video yearbook, so they put me in this like studio where I was editing video and stuff, and like the local newspaper did a spot on me, and I was a nerd.
Yeah.
I was a total nerd. Like,
Right.
I liked girls. I was like interested in girls, but I couldn't even get the time of day. And I didn't know what to say, and I didn't even have friends to like ask how to like approach girls.
Right.
That even continued through high school, but then I guess when I got into high school, I started becoming like. Since I was the only raver at a school of 800 kids,
Sure.
and I was a full-on raver by that time. By like 14, I was literally wearing candy,
same here.
like bubble blower necklace.
Ooh, nice.
Like I would put
You have the Jinkos?
I had the Jinkos.
Yeah.
I would like put those little sticky stars on the side of my eyes
Right.
sometimes. You know, people would make fun of me, call me gay and shit, and it's just because they didn't know what rave culture was, and I was the only one.
Exactly.
So the closest group of people that I could hang out with was the goths and the druggies, because
Sure.
they were the only ones that would really accept me.
Yeah, it was the same for me. I was like goth adjacent.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of goth adjacent. Yeah, and then I guess that's how I kind of started getting into trouble, was because the people I was hanging out with were doing drugs, and I just naturally
fell in.
I was also interested in it. I was very interested in it even at 14 or 13. I think it was 13 or 14 when I started smoking weed. I was very interested in like changing my mental state. That was something that interested me even at a young age.
Maybe that's from the small town.
I think so.
Yeah, just trying to break out of it.
I think so.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah. Also just like addictive personality type things.
Sure. Yeah. Were drugs like a big part of those early years?
Yeah, they were a huge part of,
Really?
Basically from 13 or 14 till 20 was just drugs and music. I dropped out of high school. I just took my GED and dropped out. Then I went to college at 16, but I was like in between classes, I was smoking weed in my car and then going to classes high, and like I dropped out of college.
But to get into college at 16, you must have had something going on.
It was just a community college.
Okay.
Yeah, they just let me go. For me, it was more about the social thing. I didn't like the social environment of high school, and I couldn't take it anymore. When I was a sophomore, my second year, I dropped out like a quarter of the way through my sophomore year and took the GED, and I figured going to a community college would be better because there's no like social groups and like cliques.
You're
and
there
stuff.
for
like
a purpose.
Exactly.
Like,
and people don't like hang out in cliques like they do in high school, and that was the whole reason I was like, I want to get out of this whole social system that I don't really fit into and go to somewhere where I'm more independent. But I think what was really going on in my head that the whole time was I just want to do drugs and make music. I just want to smoke weed and make music.
Right.
And I'm trying to find something that makes me look like I'm actually doing something productive for my parents during the day.
Sure.
So that I can get to come home and smoke weed and make music.
Sure, of course, that makes total sense. And at the same time, were you going to a lot of raves?
Yeah, there was actually, even though it was a small town, there was a huge rave scene there in the mid 90s. There was a store that sold the Jenkos and records and the clothes and
There's
everything.
like the one store,
The
right?
one store, yeah. And then lots of raves like at normal venues, but then out in the mountains where people would bring speakers, and like it was every weekend there was something going on. And at first I was so young, my mom had to drive me. She would drive me there, drop me off at like 9, and I would just stand in the back. And
It sounds really similar to my experience, man. I grew up in Minneapolis, which is not a small town, but the rave scene there was very healthy, super improvised venues, very underground.
Yeah.
But it was the same for me in high school. Like I was kind of the one raver. There were a couple others, but I was, one of a small group of raver kids. And I think in the end, that's how I ended up making friends with people outside of my social sphere, was eventually raving, and rave music was starting to bubble into people's interest or their peripheral. And so then, my senior year, like the cool kids were like, hey, we want to go to a rave.
Exactly.
Right?
That's how, yeah. I ended up running into kids from my high school when I would come to these giant raves in LA, which was like Juju Beats, and even Insomniac was doing stuff back then.
Sure.
There'd be like 30,000 people on the top of the Angeles Crest Mountains in San Bernardino or Lake Arrowhead. And I would run into kids that I had gone to high school with, and they were suddenly realizing, oh, this stuff is cool now.
So the music you were making kind of all along those years, was anyone hearing it?
Yeah, I would bring my Walkman to high school and like show people, like anybody that I was like slightly friends with or cool with, and I think I tried to impress girls by showing them. I would show them music that I made at home.
Right.
Like I just cringe thinking about that, like showing a girl some song that I made at home on a Walkman, just trying to impress her. But
I definitely did similar things.
And then I did like I was making all kinds of stuff back then. I was making like R&B. There was a kid that wanted to be a rapper at my high school, so I was making rap beats for him after school sometimes.
Were you good at that point?
I was pretty good. Yeah, listening back to it, I mean, it wasn't like Billboard Top 100 material, it was
for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, for I guess I was like 14 at that time. It was pretty good for that. And then this wasn't even a thing at our high school, but I managed to convince somebody at my high school to let me perform in the quad, like to the whole school at lunch, because I had written this R&B song. And it was one like Montel Jordan, and like there's a certain phase of like early mid 90s R&B,
like,
and
this is how we do it.
Yeah, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
Era. And I had written something really similar to that, and I performed it in front of my whole school. I produced it, and then I like sang it in front of my whole school, and I just remember like being completely mortified, and I remember in retrospect, like I didn't have a good voice. I still don't have a good voice for singing. Like I can hit the notes, but my voice just doesn't sound cool.
Right.
You know, you have to have a certain tone. It's something you're either born with or not, really.
I always wished I could be a singer, and it's just never going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen for me. No matter how many filters I put on my voice, I can't do anything. So yeah, I performed this R&B song in front of my entire school because I just wanted to be cool, I think, and that was the only way that I knew how, was to show them what I was doing. And I think I got made fun of more for it than anything.
Yeah. It's weird, those innocent days. Like I remember for a while, I was the same way. I loved to sing, and I don't think I was even really aware that I wasn't a good singer until like I was with somebody, and I think I was singing. I have a very concrete memory. I must be traumatized from it, but I was in the car. There's something on the radio, and I was singing along with it. And like the other person just started laughing for out of the blue, just laughing at me. Yeah. And I never before, I was like, oh, I'm bad at this. And it's just like, it never occurred to me.
I had that moment as well.
It's a little rough. So when did the thought that music could be, I mean, I guess you were saying, you were just looking for ways that you could keep making music.
I think I knew that music was going to be the way I made a living in my career from the time I was like 13.
Did you have any examples of other people making music where you saw, hey, there could be money? Or
I had no idea of the business structure whatsoever. I mean, the posters on my wall at that time were Armin van Helden and Ace of Base, and like I do remember reading like a Mix Mag article, and I remember this article with Armin van Helden in the later 90s, and this was by the time I was like 16 and really getting deeper into like house and strictly house and not doing anything else. And Armin gave this interview where he's talking about his remix rate, and he was like the most in-demand remixer at the time in like 98. And that was when he was doing the whole Speed Garage thing, like Spin Sugar and all that. So his interview, he's like, basically I decided I didn't want to do remixes, so I just kept raising my rate, and I eventually bumped it up to $50,000 a remix. And he's like, people kept biting, and he's like, so I just kept doing them for $50,000. And I remember reading that article as a 16-year-old kid and thinking of $50,000 for a remix, and I was just like, oh,
in the 90s too.
Oh, well, that's when you could get $50,000 for a remix. That was pretty much the only time you could get $50,000 for a remix. it got cut in half anytime after that. But I remember that specifically and being like, okay, there is actually potential to make a fuckload of money doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And
do you remember the first time you made money?
Yeah.
Either producing or performing?
When I was performing, they would, from the time I was 16, I started playing in local clubs, and they would pay me like $50. But actually, I think I gave it back to them most times because I was so high on ecstasy that I would like give the money back to them because I would say like, I just want to play for free. I'm just doing it for the love. So I would literally give the money back to the promoters every time.
That is the most plur thing
I've ever. But that's a little glimpse into where I was at when I was 16. I made a drum and bass track with a friend of mine when I was 16, and he had some connection and sold it to some friend of his that was making a movie, and they paid us $350, and that was the first check I ever made. And then after that, there was a lull and a lot of stuff happened, and then the next time I really made money off of music was when I was 20. And that's when it like started actually rolling in.
So yeah, the partying got a little too intense.
I got way out of hand with drugs, basically. I wouldn't even say partying, because for me, a party was staying in my studio. Even after I moved out of got kicked out of my parents' house, staying in my studio and taking ecstasy or coke or whatever and making music. I would prefer to stay in my studio and do drugs and use them as a performance enhancer to make music than to go out and party with people.
Sure, it was never a social thing.
No, I mean, I did go out socially and take a lot of ecstasy with my friends, but basically between the time I was like 15, 16, and 20, I went in like head first and basically did every single drug that is in existence except for heroin. I'm lucky I never touched that, because I probably would have gotten really addicted to it, but nobody was doing that around there. But I was literally into everything, and I won't mention them all, but I did them all on a regular basis. I like bought it from people. It wasn't just like a casual thing. And then I ended up going to rehab when I was 20 because I got really out of control with it, mainly the ecstasy, to be honest. And you don't hear about a lot of people going to rehab for ecstasy, but I was doing it a few times a week, taking like 5-10 pills at a time because I had such a tolerance.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. That's I mean, in a way, do you think going through that sort of before your career really launched helped you in the end? I mean, I shouldn't say help, but I mean...
No, I do think of it as a positive thing. Actually, I'm glad I did it. The only thing that I regret, I mean... It's twofold. I can't say that I'm glad I did it and I regret it. So overall, I
think you can.
I'm glad I did it. I regret that I do definitely have some kind of permanent brain damage and permanent brain issues from it that I'm still trying to reverse through like taking neuroprotective supplements and stuff like that. But I can definitely feel like the holes in my brain or the lack of serotonin and dopamine because I did so much of it.
Just the chemistry is a little off.
Yeah, my brain chemistry has never been the same since. So that's the part of it that I regret, but the part of it that I'm glad I did was like it really did enhance my mind in other ways and like creative ways to where I can kind of make music and go back to that feeling and remember what it felt like.
Yeah, tap into that vibe.
Tap into that without actually taking it now. So
yeah, well, and that's super valuable. And it's something I've always wondered about because I was never a big like drug guy. If I'm addicted to anything, it's probably food. But it's, for me, like, I was never a big drug guy. I think I was just too nerdy. I was worried about it.
Yeah.
And, but I've always wondered, would that have helped me make music? And even still, I wonder about that.
Yeah.
And, would accessing, different parts of my brain or having those experiences help me? Because I'm always fascinated with creativity and how it works and how to access it. So that's interesting for me to think about.
I do think it helped with creativity and my overall music and the quality of my music. For the rest of my life, it changed the circuitry of my brain.
Did it change the sound of what you were making?
Yeah, I went super housey and super just like I was experimenting with everything. Like I was making trance and drum and bass and literally every type of electronic music. And then when I started getting more and more into drugs, I honed in on house because
You got focused.
Also for some reason house music just sounded the best on drugs and period to me.
Sure.
Like the more I got into it, the more I got the house music tunnel vision. It was deep house for a couple years, like strictly deep house. Even the first 5-7 years of my career were deep house and like Chicago house. So
Yeah.
I was really, really tunnel vision into that specific sound.
I kind of built my career in Chicago. That's like where I call home in my heart, even though I live in California now.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of love for the old Chicago house.
Yeah, that was what it was for me.
So around age 20, how did you kind of return to it? Did you have sort of a big release that brought you back, or?
It was a weird situation. I mean, I was still producing music in the bedroom that I was renting in this house, but I was taking so much ecstasy that my parents had my mom basically had extended an open invitation to like pay for me to go to rehab for about a year that she had just continually reminded me of every time that she saw me. And it was just kind of this open invitation, like whenever you're ready and whenever you realize you are ready, you just give us the word and we will pay for you to go to rehab.
And that's a pretty enlightened attitude.
It was a pretty enlightened attitude. There was a lot of really horrible things for them that led up to it, and I still feel bad for putting them through it. But they eventually gained that enlightened attitude when I lived on my own for a while. And then when I was 20, there was a series of events that led up to me hitting. I literally did hit rock bottom.
Right.
And I sent an email to my mom saying, like, will you help me? I need to go to rehab. Like, I need help with this. And they sent me this rehab in Orange County. And I ended up staying there. It was originally for 3 months, and I ended up liking it so much and like enjoying it so much, and it worked for me, and I actually wanted to get sober, and I had hit bottom. Unlike half the people in there, they were sent there by the court system, and they didn't really want to be there. So I was like a model student at this rehab. I ended up staying there for 9 months and like doing this school program that they had with it. And so I basically was in rehab for 9 months, and then I lived in a halfway house for 3 months after that. And in rehab, I met this kid who was an aspiring rapper producer, but he had never touched a piece of gear in his life. And I was showing him my music, like stuff that I had made. And he's like, okay, he had a trust fund. He had like gotten some money from his grandparents, like a considerable sum of money, like $500,000 or something like that. Yeah. So he, while we were both still in rehab, because it was kind of this like half you're there and you live in the house, but the other half, like you can go out and kind of do your own thing. It was a fairly like free rehab where they do kind of give you the opportunity to relapse and go out and do that if that's what you want to do. Right. Luckily, I didn't want to do that. But he rented a studio and just bought all this gear at once. I told him what to buy. I was like, get the MPC, get this and this, get this synths. And he's like, if you just teach me how to make music, I'll let you use my studio whenever I go up north to visit my parents.
What a great deal.
Yeah, so I taught him to produce rap and to produce his own stuff for what he was trying to do. And then like almost every weekend, he would go up to visit his family and his friends in the Bay, and I would make house music in this guy's studio. And that's how I made my first record that got released, that I made money off of, that I got paid for. And literally once that record came out, I moved up to Oakland, which was San Francisco was kind of where the scene was the hottest at the moment. And I just immediately started putting out more and more records, and it happened in rehab. Like I got my first record made in rehab. Like while I was living, I remember the curfew from the halfway house, and I was always coming home after the curfew because I was making music till like 4 a.m, and like they would scold me, but I knew I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't doing anything bad. So like they ultimately didn't care, but. Yeah, I was hustling, trying to like get back into music somehow. And
that's a pretty incredible story, man. What was the first song, or what label put it out?
It was a little label called Good Family Recordings, and it was their first release. they paid me, it was either 300 or 350 bucks.
Yeah.
And I think the record, I mean, initially I think it sold like 300 or 500 copies, but then once my name got bigger over the next few years, they had to like repress it and re-release it because there was more demand for it.
Were you going by Wolfgang Gartner at that time?
No, I was going by Joey Youngman for the first.
Okay.
That was 2003 through 2007, 2008. I was using my real name to produce records, and I put out over 100 records in those 4 years. But I did them. I was using 8 different aliases. Joey Youngman was
8 different aliases.
Yeah, Joey Youngman is my real name, but then I had basically I was. It was such sample-based music that I could make it so quickly, and I could actually make I was doing 4-track EPs or 3-track EPs on vinyl, and I would make a new one every week. And I knew that people wouldn't buy a Joey Youngman record every week because DJs wanted to have they wanted to have variation.
Right.
So the aliases was literally a way for me to deceitfully trick people into buying my music.
Yeah, that's just good marketing.
Yeah,
man.
so I had 7 other ones that I used. And
Holy shit.
After a couple of years, people started catching on and realizing that it was all me. But by that time,
was it all like similar sounding music?
It was all the exact same thing. I didn't have any, like, the aliases weren't different sounds or anything. It was all the same thing, but I just put it out. It was a business thing. It was like a marketing thing.
Of course.
It was just music, and
that's genius.
That whole phase of my career was completely quantity over quality in every single way. It was just like make a track in 4 hours, make another track in 4 hours, make another track in 4 hours. Then I was dealing with distribution. I had like 7 distributors here in the States and Australia and the UK.
Were you putting out all these records yourself?
Yeah, I had 3 of my own record labels because
Jesus Christ.
First I was putting it all out on other labels like San Francisco labels like Night Shift and Ohm Records and stuff like that. And then I got tired of doing that, and I got the contacts for all the distributors that all these labels were using, and I built my own business with 3 different record labels to support the 8 different aliases, and just kind of cycled them around the 3 labels. And it was literally just me making all the music, and then in the morning I would like deal with distribution, deal with, it was all faxes back then, so I'd have to fax the order sheet and like get the orders. And then I remember when the checks from the distributor started coming in my mailbox at this apartment I was living in Oakland, and I was like I just turned 21, I think. And I got like $10,000 worth of checks in a week for like the first record that I put out on my record label. And I was like, I dropped out of the college that I was going to at that time. I got those checks, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm about to make more money than I could ever make going to this school. So this is what I'm doing.
That's amazing at 21. And you said quantity over quality, but it sounds like they were selling pretty well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like not to sound arrogant or anything, but like my quality rushed back then was better than most of the other stuff that was out there, so I could get away with it.
Yeah, well, and I guess you already had, 10 years of experience under your belt, which is pretty rare at that age.
Yeah, that's the thing. It had been bubbling up for so long, and I had been doing it, and I had been sending demos to record labels since I was 13 years old. I had only ever gotten one call back from Nervous Records when I was 15. They called me back, and they were about to sign one of my tracks, and it never happened. So I had just been trying for 10 years, and then when the gates finally opened and I got in, I was like, I am taking this. And
yeah, I love that. I talk about that moment a lot with people I talk to on this show. Is just, those windows of opportunity, or when you can kind of really see that something's working at the time, and the importance of like really dedicating yourself at that time, or really jumping in. Yep. Because those windows don't always stick around.
Exactly. Yeah, that was exactly when I went into high gear, and something in my brain changed, and I started to be very entrepreneurial, and I'm not reading any books about it, but it just kicked in, and I realized I am a natural entrepreneur, and also I am a natural business person, and all these instincts started kicking in, and that's when I really became an adult, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like if both your parents were self-employed with
that was the other thing. Yeah, both my parents were self-employed, and my dad had the exact same history. He played in bands, and they tried to get record deals, and that didn't work out. He dropped out of colleges, and then he ended ended up finding gemstones. But
Right.
for me, it was music.
Music, gemstones, same thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how we end up being a lot like our parents in the end, you know?
Yeah.
I think about that as I get older, too, because my parents are very different from me as far as career. On paper, very different. But the older I get, I'm just exactly like my parents.
I know. Yeah, the older I get, I am my dad, basically.
Yeah, no, me too. It's really weird. For me, the weirdest, but we sound exactly the same. And so, yeah.
Same. I
Really?
use like the same methods of talking and like coming up with the response and like just everything, mannerisms. It's really weird.
Yeah. It's very, very strange how that works. But I'm into it. I mean, especially, I think that's another thing is when you're younger, you're like, I don't want to be like my parents.
Exactly.
But then when you get older, you're like, oh, wait, my parents are great.
Yeah, exactly. They're cool. I respect them. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So in the Joey Youngman era of production, were you touring? Were you playing shows at that time?
I toured every continent on the planet before I even changed my name to Wolfgang Gartner in 2008.
That's amazing.
I played mostly overseas back then. I played in England probably the most. I would just tour England for, a couple weeks, but like four times a year.
Did you have agents or managers or anything like that?
I just had an agent. Yeah, I just had an agent on the West Coast. Nobody really had managers back then. It was mostly overseas because the house thing in America was kind of dying in the early 2000s, and the only place where it was really still thriving was the UK.
Yeah,
played a lot in like Belgium, Netherlands, even like Russia, South Africa, South America, Asia, South Korea, Japan, China. I did a China tour. All this
China
stuff.
tour at that time is pretty...
I've never toured China as Wolfgang Gartner, but
really?
I toured China as Joey Youngman. I remember like flying in and getting there, and like there was like this giant flyer with my face on it that was on a 3-story building.
Oh my God.
I took a picture of it. It was the biggest flyer that's ever been made for me in my entire career.
That's
and it was
incredible.
Before Wolfgang Gartner, which nobody even knows about me before Wolfgang Gartner. But there was this huge, like, very successful chapter of my career that happened before that.
Yeah.
Too.
Do you think when you became Wolfgang and took on that name, is that what brought you back to the States a bit? Or do you think it was kind of more the overall vibe in the States just changing over time?
What the Wolfgang thing was, it was actually a very specific thing happened. 2007, the vinyl industry basically collapsed.
Yeah.
Beatport and a couple other sites had started to thrive around 2005, and I had started distributing my stuff to them, and that's when digital downloads started kicking in. And I was still making a good amount of money off of vinyl sales, but 2007, I had a lot of records in the hands of a lot of distributors, and I think 5 of the 7 big ones all went bankrupt within a 2-week period, and none of them paid me. It was tens of thousands of dollars in money that they owed me, and I wasn't going to be able. I owned a house by this point, like. I wasn't going to be able to pay my mortgage just based on like digital download sales of Deep House at that time. And also Deep House and the style that I was making was really sort of dying in popularity at that time. And that's when electro was like right when Put Your Hands Up for Detroit was like 2007 and Justice. That was when all that stuff started coming out and people started getting...
Blogs started getting big.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened was all these distributors went bankrupt, and my business basically just collapsed to a point that wasn't going to be sustainable for me to continue to pay my bills. And I had to make a change in my business, which was ended up being a style change in my music. So honestly, the way that it all started out was a business decision. Like, I can't make Deep House anymore because I'm not going to be able to make money off of it. What is a style of electronic dance music that I can get into, that I can learn to like, that's popular, that I can continue to make a good living off of, because I'm going to have to continue to adapt to changes in the music industry throughout my whole life. And I knew that. I was like, this is going to keep happening. So,
and it sounded like you had already been making different styles of music when you were younger.
Yeah, and I had made every single style of electronic music. I had made a bunch of trance tracks, and like, it's not like I only liked house music. Like, I liked other stuff, but it was just a matter of I had been doing house for so long. So what I did was I started downloading the Beatport Top 10 every couple weeks, and I would just study the formulas of the Top 10 in Beatport.
Same as Ace of Base back in the day.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I would figure out how to make it.
I would study it, and I would start making it, and I made 2 songs to start, and I remember I sent them to, it was the A&R for Rockstar Games, who was making, I mean, obviously they did Grand Theft Auto, but they were doing Midnight Club, which was a racing game, and they were looking for songs, and I had this guy's contact from back in the house days, but I sent him these first 2 electro tracks, and he bought them for the game, and they licensed them, and it was the most money I had ever made off of a single song ever in my entire career up until that point. And that was the first electro track I ever made. So I was like, okay, this is obviously what I need to do now.
Yeah, more the light bulb goes on.
Yeah,
again.
Obviously I must be good at it. I don't hate it. I don't love it quite as much as I loved what I was doing before, but I knew that I could learn to, and eventually I did learn to love it, and more so than what I was doing before. And it was a bigger challenge than making this sample-based quantity over quality house music. This stuff was completely different. It was challenging.
Complicated.
It was complicated. It sold so well that you couldn't use samples because I would have gotten sued. So that's when my career changed. Like, okay, I was under the radar on vinyl before and like selling like a few thousand copies of records. But then it changed to like, okay, you're about to be on the radar. You need to stop sampling. Everything needs to be original. And also your quality needs to be a lot higher, and quantity, not necessarily as much. If you can make this much money off of one song, you don't need to crank out 3 of them real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that whole era because the first song I ever really released, I self-released this 4-track EP with me and a couple friends in Chicago, and we pressed it to vinyl, and this was in 2007, kind of exactly what you were saying, when no one wanted to buy vinyl anymore. And so we pressed it to vinyl, and, mostly it didn't sell. Yeah. And then, you kind of saw the rise of Bloghouse or electro or whatever you want to call it, and it became this movement. And I think, you were saying for you and for me, and I think a lot of other people, it was sort of like, oh, there's like this new door opening.
Yep.
And, in my perception of it, at least, you were one of those torchbearers. Who was coming up with you, like, right in that era?
There are other people who did the exact same switch at me at the exact same time, and the most well-known example is Cascade. We were both on Ohm Records producing Deep House, and we both pretty much switched over to a more commercial electro progressive house at the exact same time when all this crashed.
Did you guys know each other at the time?
Yeah, we knew each other. I still know him. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I would call him and get advice from him a lot because he was older and he had been in it for longer than me. Yeah. And he was always the type of guy that was really glad to help younger people.
Seems like
advice.
A really nice dude.
Yeah, he was like literally the nicest person I've known in the industry. And then Deadmau5 was the one who was really like just killing the Beatport charts at the time when I got into it and started. And then pretty much he had just started getting his number ones on Beatport right when I started making electro.
Okay.
So it was like that. I started pretty much the same time Deadmau5 started doing electro.
Right. And did you know him at the time? How did you kind of first meet him?
I was just a fanboy for so long until whenever I made Undertaker in 2009, 2010. And when it came out, he literally first he tweeted at me, and then he somehow got my phone number, and I was in Charlotte, North Carolina for a gig at dinner with the promoter, and Deadmau5 calls me. and I didn't know what the number was, and I just pick it up, and it's Deadmau5. And I was just like a fanboy of his at that point. And he's like, dude, I just heard Undertaker. We need to make a song together. I'll pay for the flight. Like, just come on out. And I was like, holy shit. This is amazing.
Those are pretty special moments.
So I was literally, I didn't have any, because he was he separated himself. He was also kind of a loner. And I don't know, necessarily introvert, but he didn't really like to hang out with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, I don't know him at all, but it seems like he's always just been very much kind of in his own little bubble. You know?
He's self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So I didn't bug him, and like I just kind of like got very much influenced by him in those years, and I'm sure people heard that, and I'm sure he heard that, and I tried not to copy him, but I'm sure I did so many times subconsciously because I was listening to his music so much.
But I mean, that's what all of us do, right?
Yeah, it's true. We all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
I mean, you hear a song, at least for me, like I'll hear a song and I'm like, oh shit, this is a really good song, and I almost get mad that like somebody made this good song.
That's the barometer. When you get mad that you didn't make that song,
right.
That's when you know it's a good song.
Yeah. In that era, it sounded like things for Wolfgang Gartner took off kind of instantly.
Yes, they did. Very fast. Beatport was a big catalyst in that. I had been building my relationship with them for 3 years prior to starting kindergarten and putting out those Wolfgang tracks on Beatport. So I knew the people that worked there, and I had a rep there. His name was Tom Hoke, and he always helped me because he believed in my music, and he tried to like get me the good ad spaces and stuff, because you couldn't buy ad spaces on Beatport.
Right.
I don't know if you can now or if you ever could, but back when
it was all just curated.
It was curated, and they chose who got the ads. So for my first front to back was my first number one on Beatport, and having a number one on Beatport back then meant like you'd make between $10,000 and $15,000 off of the song just on Beatport,
which
sales.
is insane. I mean, I think for our listeners, Beatport was the end all
place.
Like, that was where every DJ got all of their music.
Yeah, and that was where you made a majority of your money off of music,
right?
But only if you could get it into like the top 15, and especially the top 10.
I mean, I guess it's sort of like Spotify now and getting on the right playlist.
Yep. It's just like Spotify is like the thing that everybody focuses on right now.
Yeah.
Beatport was the Spotify back then 10 years ago. So I built up I guess I made front to back and whatever the other song was on the EP, and I knew that this song had the potential to make it to number one on Beatport, and this was 2008. And so I just kind of built it up with my rep there and started telling him like, look, I've got something coming that I'm gonna need help on, and you guys have these giant front page ad spots, and I know that if you give me one, I know that this song will go to number one, and I really need the help because I'm starting this new alias and I need a number one, like I need a hit. And
you were just you were that confident about the song.
I was that confident about it. I had spent so long designing it to be a hit, you know, like I was trying to design a hit, like that. And I'll admit that some people, you know.
No, I like that. I mean, because and I think that's an important thing that we always talk about is the balance between, you know, making something for them versus something for you.
Exactly. And I've gone through so many different variations of that. And like right now, I'm sort of making stuff for me. Back then, I was completely designing it for them, for the audience. And he ended up giving me the big front page ad, like the biggest one that you can get. And it went to number one, and it sat there for a long time. And that was literally, everything went up like a rocket ship from that point.
Yeah.
About 2008, late 2008.
Sure, yeah. When did the Fifth Symphony track come out?
That was 2009.
That was 2009, okay.
Yep.
So chugging right along there.
Yep.
And when did you work with Deadmau5? Was that also like...
that was 2010. We did Animal Rights.
Yeah. And
then we did Channel 42 in 2012.
Yeah, so it's all in kind of that 4 or 5 year span is when it was really popping, right?
It was about 2008 it started getting going, and things were building up. I wasn't, you know, making crazy money or anything, but the momentum of my career was insane at that time. And then around 2010, it really started changing.
Do you think you were able to capitalize on all that potential and momentum because of the career you had already had?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had been doing it for so long that I knew exactly what to do. I knew, okay, Fifth Symphony, like in the middle of making it, I was like, I'm going to need a manager when this comes out because this is going to be a huge hit and it's going to get licensed everywhere. And I'm going to be in the next level of my career. So I got with my manager in the middle of making Fifth Symphony, and I remember showing it to him and him being impressed with it. And I was just like, I knew the steps that I needed to take at the time because I had been in that industry.
That's so cool, man. Josh and Kurt from Flosserdamus are good friends of mine. We came up in Chicago around the same time, and I recently talked to both of them on this show, and they were saying kind of the same thing, is that, they had already had more or less a full career in the party jam mashup era, and then that kind of wound down, and then when the trap thing came around, they were ready. They had that experience, and I think that's so valuable. It shows the value of hard work to me,
Yeah, it's true.
Because I think there's this perception for a lot of younger kids who are looking to get into the industry or get started that you kind of just need this one big thing to happen and, you take off.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is, so many of us were just grinding for years and years and years.
That's what most people don't know, yeah. And they see a few examples of people who had that one hit and did take off. And there are some examples of people who did that and who have had very successful, lucrative careers and are maybe still around being successful, but they are the extreme minority, and people don't realize that.
Yeah. Even in this industry where, a lot of flash and glamour can take you a long way, really at the end of the day, it's the people who work the hardest who stick around.
That's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yep. I know some really talented people that are just not motivated enough anymore to use that talent, and it doesn't matter. They're more talented than the people that are beating them, but people that are beating them are working more hours and putting more effort into it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think maybe the positive flip side of that is that, if you're insecure about what you do or you're always comparing what you do to somebody else, you can still win if you just keep working harder.
Yep.
And so
that's true.
All right. So, we're into 2010, 2011, your career. Is that like what you would say the peak of?
I look at peaks in.
I mean, you're still, doing it obviously, so it's weird to talk about it. But
no. I actually have no problem talking about the peak as a past tense because I mean everybody knows that.
Well, sure. I mean, everything's got a shelf life, especially in the entertainment industry.
First of all, EDM was a bubble. That's no secret. You can find about 2,000 different good articles on how the EDM bubble burst in 2015, 2016. And
would you agree with that? You
absolutely.
think it burst?
Yeah. I can tell you the time period exactly when it burst.
Right.
I watched everybody's fees drop. I watched my own fees drop. I watched people go out of business. I watched everything happen live.
Right.
I would say the bubble didn't even really start until about 2012 as far as like the financial implications of a bubble and people's income, including my income, being kind of grossly inflated for what we were doing. It was around 2012, 2013, and even 2014 where that bubble was at its peak. And I think that goes for most people. Some people it might have carried into 2015, but it's basically 2012, 11, 12 through 2014, 2015. That's when we were all making probably more than we should have, and the system was a little bit off, and
market corrects itself.
Corrects itself. I was just going to say everything that leads to a bubble happening and a bubble bursting was all that stuff was happening. If you look at the real estate bubble or the tech bubble, any of it, you can look at all the symptoms and the signs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would agree because sometimes I'll argue with people when they say the bubbles burst in the sense of, to me, I don't think the popularity has gone away.
No, the popularity hasn't really gone away.
Yeah, but you're right. Probably just a money thing.
Yeah, the bubble has burst for anybody who has a career in it because it's just all spread out now.
Yeah.
There's,
and probably a little harder to get in now.
A lot harder to get in now. I'm so glad that I'm not trying to just get in now. I wouldn't be able to make it.
You think so? Really?
I wouldn't be able to make it. The kids, I tend to say kids, but they are mostly kids to me because I'm old. The kids, the people that are trying to get into it today are hustling so hard, and they're on social media all the time, and they're self-promoting themselves, and like what it takes today to make it is a lot more self-promotion, branding, marketing, social media, and the music honestly has much less to do with it.
I think it can have much less for sure. I think good music can still win, but I do agree with you that it doesn't necessarily have to be that for you to be successful.
I would say that the most important things that are there do not include music in the formula for winning right now today.
Right.
Which is a pretty pessimistic attitude, but I stand by it and I'll debate anybody on it.
No, yeah, that's fair. I mean, I am excited by a lot of the new music that's being made right now.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think there's a lot of interesting, cool stuff going on, but I think that's maybe a consequence of, I've been talking to a lot of people about this lately, of sort of, I think all of us who make music are at a point now where we've kind of, what you were saying, the peak of 2015, 2016, the bubble bursting, I think a lot of people are just trying to figure out what's next now. And so I see a lot of people going back, either to sort of what they were passionate about in the first place or trying to explore new avenues of music.
Yep.
And I don't know. That's exciting to me. I think it's a good and bad time.
It is a good and bad time.
And I don't really know where it's heading.
No, me neither. I agree with everything you just said. It's kind of another 2007 for me, too.
Yeah.
It's another... I try to compare it to periods in history because I've watched even the 90s. Like, I watched all these trends happen in the 90s. I watched the rave scene collapse in, 2000 when they passed the Rave Act, and this shut down a lot of events all over the U.S., whatever it was, the crack house law. And that severely impacted dance music and the industry in general in 2000. And then this thing with vinyl and digital in 2007, 2008, and the sounds changing to electro. And I've seen so many different trends, and I've even, studied the 78 through 83, 84, where disco really kind of fell off the map and transitioned into something else.
And that's really what we're mirroring, right?
I think that's the closest period to what's happening right now. It's like 1984 right now, basically.
Yeah, I think about that, and I think about, and a lot of people do not like it when I make this comparison, but the hair metal era.
EDM was EDM. I heard this recently. Somebody tweeted it, or somebody said EDM is basically hair metal, and that's so spot on.
And it is to me too. And and I make EDM. I make a lot of bass music and trap music and all that, and I love it. And I'm not embarrassed about it at all. But to me, there's strong parallels to that scene. It was a very distinct aesthetic.
Yep.
It
was about the show. It was about the costume. It was about the gimmick. It was about loud. And
and just like what you were saying, some of that music was really good. Yeah. Some of it not so good.
Yeah, but I still listen to some hair metal.
100%.
Yeah, there was some great stuff that came out of
that. Yeah, and I try to be conscious of that too. And I think hearing you talk about your career is really inspirational in that vein too. And of every scene, every sound has a time period, And if you're not ready for the end of that period, then, you might be out of luck when it happens.
Yep.
Again, the ones who survive are the ones who are able to kind of pivot. There's, I think, a lot of good examples of artists who have been able to do that over the years.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good way to talk about your latest album, which came out last year. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Well, that came out at the very beginning of 2016.
Okay.
And right now we're in the summer of 2017.
So it's been a while.
But I made a majority of the music on that album in 2013 and 2014, and it just took so long to come out and get released.
Gotcha.
That to me, there's a couple of the songs that I made in 2015, early 2015, late 2014, that I like the one with E40 and Dame Funk.
I just listened to that last night.
Yeah, that's the only track on the album that I'm really proud of. The rest of it I just look back on as stuff that I was making in 2013, 2015.
So by the time it came out, you were already kind of over it.
I was so over it, and I had just taken a break off of touring for a year to focus on other stuff, and I was trying to get this album out the whole time, and it took a year to come out.
Yeah.
So by the time it came out, it was just too little, too late. It was just whatever. Might as well throw it out there at this point.
Right. Well, and I think it, at least from what I could see, it got a decent reaction, right? I mean, it seemed like.
I don't.
From your fans, at least. I mean.
No.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't say. Well, also the word fans for me is a very interesting
Yeah,
word.
you're right.
And
I try not to use that word. But it's
I try
easy
not to use it as well because fans are not something that are permanent or always there.
Yeah.
Fans come and go.
Yeah. Your supporters, can we say, or people who like your music? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing is we could have a whole podcast on just like
That's
what's
the
the proper
semantics.
definition
Yeah.
of fans? Because is a fan somebody that sticks with you through everything that you make just because they love your brain?
Right.
Because I don't know if there's a single person who's stuck with me through everything that I've made in my entire career. So
Yeah, well,
I
that's
don't,
a long career, too.
it is, but like if somebody really loves a band, they'll listen to them through. Somebody loves the Beatles, they'll listen to them through their psychedelic phase and through everything
Right.
else. But I can't think of a single like hardcore fan that has stuck through me through everything that I've done. So I actually kind of object to the term fans in the way that it's used
Sure.
because most people tend to move on to things that they like as times change.
Well, and
So-
especially, I was literally just yesterday talking to a friend of mine about this. I think as an artist, if you take any time off, like you said, you took a year off the road
Yeah.
and had that delay, I think, and I've done similar things, that time off, I think if you're not careful, can really like lose fan
Oh, yeah.
or whatever word we're using. You know,
Yeah.
like people kind of just check out if you go quiet,
Yeah.
and then you come back. And I've had this happen to me more than once, where I'll be quiet for a minute, I'll come back expecting to kind of have the same response that I had before,
Yeah.
but then you sort of figure out that in that time, these other people were living their lives too, and maybe they found something else they like more, or maybe they're just
Yep.
not on the same level with you that they were before.
Yeah.
For any number of reasons.
That's definitely all true. For me, I took it in 2000. I started my break in 2015 in February.
what prompted that.
I was touring too much,
Yeah.
and touring was not good for me mentally and physically, and I was having some like real health issues on the
Sure.
road that were strictly due to touring too much and the stress and anxiety from touring.
Yeah.
And nothing that could be fixed by like medication. So
Right.
I needed to stop.
Well, and it's good to acknowledge that, man, because you definitely see, there's so much money in touring now. And I mean, that's where the most people are making the most money.
Yeah.
And so people don't like leaving money on the table, and for
Yeah.
me, I mean, I'm the same way. If there's a day off and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you could, fly across the country and make a little more money that day, I'll say yes 100% of the time,
Yeah.
even if I'm tired or sick or whatever.
Yeah. It was a necessity. I had no choice. Obviously, and I didn't actually. I didn't actually think that I was going to come back.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't say that publicly, but I never planned on coming back.
Oh, wow. What did you think you were going to do?
I thought I was going to produce rap.
Oh, okay.
And that's actually all I did in 2015 was make rap beats. And I spent a year doing that. And by the end of the year, not one single beat had gotten used. And I realized that this was something that either I wasn't good at or that I just wasn't going to be able to make work as a career.
Right.
And so I kind of came back to dance music as a necessity. I was like, okay, I obviously still have to have income. I still need to do something. The rap thing wasn't working. That's what I wanted to do. So I'm going to come back and do what I was doing before, except just not kill myself this time.
Right.
And have kind of a different approach to it and maybe do more stuff that I really, truly like that feeds my soul more. And
Yeah.
kind of just
Did it feel
approach
refreshing to come back with that attitude?
Yeah, it's a completely different game now for me. It's not like hustling for the money and making the music for other people. Now it's like making sure that I'm happy and making sure that my life is balanced, that my
Yeah.
relationships are balanced, making sure that I enjoy what I'm making, making sure that I'm not playing too many shows or getting burnt out on the shows.
Sure.
And it's just all about like keeping me sane and happy now.
Did you like touring even when you were doing it so much, or was that always kind of a secondary thing to making the music?
I always enjoyed playing good shows,
Sure.
and I still always enjoy playing good shows.
Sure.
But unfortunately, that's like 90 to 120 minutes out of a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
And to be honest, for me, those other 22 hours can be pretty much pure hell.
Yeah, I mean that's the yin and yang of it, I guess, is all the terrible traveling and the
hotels,
the hotels
the
and
flights.
And I think for both you and me, you said you're an introvert earlier, and I am too. And when I travel, oftentimes I don't have like people with me, like it's just me. And then, you're alone in this hotel room in a place you don't know.
Yep.
And either you choose to like just sit there in the hotel room and be by yourself, or you go out with the promoter and a bunch of people you don't know,
right.
Which for me, half the time is even more awkward.
Yeah.
And not because they're bad people, but just because,
Because you're an introvert and you're awkward anyway.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Same.
Yeah.
So I just stay in the hotels, and for me, it's unfun. I get work done, but then also I have a problem sleeping in hotels. Like I can't seem to sleep anywhere except for my own bed. I can't really sleep on airplanes anymore.
That makes it really tough then.
Yeah, I mean, I won't even I'm infamous for this. Like anybody that's toured with me or any tour manager that works with me knows that once we get to the city, we go straight to the hotel. Even if it's 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I do not leave that hotel ever. I get room service for every single meal. I go to the club to play the gig. I get there 15 minutes before I play. I leave directly after I play, and I go straight back to the hotel.
Wow.
And people think that it's boring, or it shows that I'm I don't really like it. And I see all these people out going out to eat and trying restaurants. And I'm I don't have the energy for that. I don't have the energy to go out and try a restaurant in some other city. I've already been to all these cities multiple times. I've already been traveling around the world for 15 years. I don't need to have those new experiences anymore. I need to be comfortable and calm and
and
relax.
just take care of yourself.
And take care of myself, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so what are you making now? I know I was looking last night, just getting ready to talk to you, and I saw it's a lot of disco influenced stuff recently. But then I also saw from that to the track you put out on Monster Cat, which was sort of this interesting tribal thing with arrow chord.
Yeah.
And are you just kind of basically doing the stuff you like, whatever interests you at this point? Or is there a goal? Are you working towards, another eventual album or something like that?
Nobody knows or has heard what I'm working on.
Okay.
Or have been working on for the past 4 months or so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything I'm referencing is probably old to you.
No. There's a few different dimensions to what I'm doing right now. For the past 4 months, I have been doing something that would not really be considered, definitely wouldn't be considered electronic dance music. I'm making a few different styles, but they're all definitely a little bit more radio friendly or pop oriented.
Sure.
And they're all going to have vocals on them. And I'm doing everything in between. I'm making some disco type tracks, but no samples, where I make it all from scratch.
Right.
There's been some people bringing that back lately, but it's fun to make it from scratch and be able to emulate those sounds without using samples.
Really challenge yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm doing some other stuff. I'm really experimenting right now musically with where I want to go next, and I have some stuff that I'm really proud of, and I think honestly is probably the best music I've ever made in my career, but I can't show it to anybody yet because the vocals aren't on it, and we don't know how it's going to get released. And this is whatever I'm working on now. It is going to be the next chapter of my career. It's definitely going to be a turn or a shift or a pivot from what I am doing right now and what I have been releasing right now.
I think that's important, right?
I have to right now. I just can't keep putting out 128 BPM bass house tracks.
Well, I was going to say, I think for anyone who's had a career, the size of yours and the length of your career, either at this point you pivot or you innovate again, or you become, a quote unquote legacy act, right? And people go to your shows to hear the hits.
Exactly, and that's, I don't want
right, yeah.
I don't want to be a legacy act, man. That's the thing is I don't want to have to play those songs for that many more years. Do you
play old stuff in your sets now?
Nah, I don't play Undertaker or Fifth Symphony or anything. The oldest stuff I'll play is 2012, 2013, insane. I can't honestly. It doesn't work with other music that's out there. Like sonically trying to mix a 2009 electro song with other stuff that I'm playing in my set, which is current music and current electro or bass house or whatever. Like it just sonically doesn't work. And even if people want to hear it, it sounds weird mixing in. And like, I can't do it.
Yeah, well, and I think as DJ, it's weird in this era where the DJ has become the rock star or the pop star, whatever it is. People now have this expectation of hits, but in reality, I mean, as DJs, the reason we all did this was this obsession with keeping it new and fresh and finding new music and pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting time that way.
What I've been releasing, like the last single I did with Snow, Find a Way, that came out on Armada and whatever was before that, Devotion on Spin and Bad Boy Sound, which I self-released. It's all just kind of a mishmash of like my old electro sound with a house that I like and also with a touch of like bass house, which is essentially Speed Garage, which is what I grew up on and what Armand Van Helden was doing for 50 Grand Remix in 1998.
It's all a cycle, man.
And
it's so weird.
A lot of people don't realize that, and they think I'm like jumping on a bandwagon when I'm really actually just like jumping back on my old hatchback Acura, the 1998, and doing the same thing.
Even later than that, I remember, when the current bass house craze started, a few years back. To me, I came up in the era, and I don't know how familiar you were, but in like 06, 07, the Trouble and Bass era. And, they were bringing all this bass house and bass line or whatever you called it from the UK at the time.
Yeah.
And then so when that came back, 5 years later, to me, I was like, oh, it's just this thing again.
Yep.
But a lot of people were like, oh, this, this new sound.
And, that was also Fidget. And like, it was kind of similar to Fidget.
Yeah. And I mean, I love those sounds. So I was kind of stoked that people liked it again because I like playing that stuff.
Exactly. For me, I was really stoked when Bass House started coming around. I was like, cool, I get to use these sounds again.
Right.
I haven't used these ones in a while.
Yeah. What do you mostly listen to just for listening enjoyment?
Well, I listen to a lot of old disco because that's kind of the foundation of what I'm making, and I'm trying to recreate it.
Yeah,
so
get back to that vibe.
I listen to a lot of that, but I also listen to a lot of pop. I listen to a lot of like, I don't know, it would be like urban crossover rap pop, sort of. Like even the stuff that Calvin Harris is doing right now is cool because he's mixing disco, and it's authentic disco with rap, and those are kind of the two things that I've always loved.
I completely agree. I was thinking about him as you were talking because he's another one where, I mean, he didn't need to make that last disco album. I don't think anyone was in his ear telling him to do that.
That was a labor of love right there.
Yeah, you could tell.
That's him doing exactly what he wants to do. And he's in a position where he can pay for all of those features, which was probably $1 million for every feature on that album. Yeah. He paid, I'm sure, but he can do that, and he can get it on the radio, and it belongs there. It's that good. But I guess like sonically, that would kind of be the closest thing that I could use as a reference point for what I'm doing right now. It's just kind of like disco funk like revival stuff, but with cool like urban vocals and rap on top of it.
Well, and you've always worked with interesting rappers.
That's the thing. I've always done this, so it's like what Calvin is doing right now is the closest reference point I can give. But there are so many other reference points throughout the last 15 years of artists and stuff that I've made that I'm kind of coming back to right now.
Well, I had completely forgotten until I saw it last night that you put out a song with Cameron and Jim Jones in 2011, something like that.
Yeah,
and that blew my mind, man. Were you in the studio with them?
No, it was that was when I was signed to Ultra, and the president of Ultra used to own, I forget what it was, huge rap label, and he had worked with Dipset before, so he knew them, and he actually landed those features for me. And it wasn't cheap, but he was the one that got them to do them.
That's pretty impressive. I can't think of them doing dance music before or since. Maybe there is one.
After that, A-Track got Cam to do a track with him.
Right. But that was like a rap song though, right?
I think so. Yeah. So I don't think they've done a dance track, and that was kind of the point. And it was the same with Eve. I was pretty sure she never did
Yeah, I can't think of
full-on
one.
house track or a dance track before that. So
Yeah.
we were trying to get people this was during like the David Guetta peak where he was all over the radio
Right.
and it was rap on electro.
Yeah,
So what we were
Akon or whoever.
we wanted to make sure that we were separating ourselves by using rappers that were like really well-known people, like from old school that weren't on other dance tracks, that other producers weren't getting on dance tracks.
Well, yeah, man, I'm super curious to hear what you've been working on. I think a lot of people will be psyched to hear it.
Yeah, I think it'll be well received, but this also comes back to the topic of fans. It's like people that are fans of like Wolfgang 2010 through 2013, or if that's really what they liked, then they're gonna hate this shit.
Sure.
But I don't really care.
But I mean, the thing is, I think if you only make music for those people, that's diminishing returns, right?
And that's becoming a legacy act too. You're just gonna make the same thing over and over. And
exactly.
Then,
With this, I mean, I think there's the potential to gain lots of new listeners.
Exactly. That's the point. And that's what I want is new listeners. To me means younger listeners, which means they're less closed-minded, they're more open-minded, they're generally less jaded about things because you get more jaded as you get older. So I would like to have more like young listeners and
in the end, I mean,
general.
isn't that what us as artists are just doing? I was talking to Diplo about this, where I mean, we're all getting older, but the people driving dance music are kids. They're young kids, and for me, sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to like steal that youth a little bit, and I keep myself young by doing what we do and by staying current with my sound and making sure that I'm not kind of just making old head music or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that way, that you're kind of just not in like a depressing way, but that doing this helps you stay young and stay vital?
Now that you say, no, I had never thought of it, but now that you say it, I think that's true. Yeah. I think maybe it is a part of what helps keep me young, because I am kind of like an old soul in a lot of other ways.
Right.
Partly because I've been through a lot of shit, and because of honestly 15 years of touring it ages
takes
you
a toll on anyone.
It ages you double normal years. So I feel like I'm like 50 years old right now. But yes, I think music might be the one thing that keeps me feeling at least 35, which is still old, but I guess younger than I feel.
Right. Well, I think touring, the toll it takes, oftentimes it's an internal, it's just, you feel tired, you feel old, even if you still look, vital and young. And usually I like to close just by asking kind of a random question, just spur of the moment, first thing that comes to your mind, just a moment in your life when music really affected you, whether that was like, a song you heard that gave you goosebumps, or something someone said that changed the way you thought about music. Just kind of, one of the first thing, or a concert you saw.
I mean, I've given this answer so many times in so many interviews, but it's literally the answer to this question, and it was the first time I heard "Good Life" by Inner City in 1993, and I remember that the flight home from Tanzania, I just kept listening to that song over and over, rewinding, playing it, and I broke the tape on the way back because I was just playing that song over and over, because it made me feel like I was on a drug.
Yeah.
Like, it made me feel like I was outside of myself, looking at the world from like outside. I remember walking through London on our layover, like listening to the song and like seeing girls and like feeling attracted to them in like a new, more adult way, because of the way that the music was affecting my dopamine and like just
connecting things for you, right?
That first time that I heard that song just changed the wiring of my brain, and that was 24 years ago. So
that's amazing. And you talk about it like it was yesterday.
I still remember it.
Yeah, those moments. I love those moments when it's just making new connections. I think that's what I remember for me. Sort of a similar moment. I was going to a rave in Minnesota. I was probably like 15, 16 at the time. And the first thing I ever started DJing was happy hardcore.
Yeah.
And
I messed around with that too.
Yeah. And I think that might have been because it was like some of the first electronic music that I heard.
Yeah.
And I heard it live at this rave that was like just in a gym, like a high school gym or something that probably someone broke into. And yeah, the DJ started playing, and the feeling I got, it was what you just said. It was like outside of my body.
Yeah.
And it was like, I didn't know I could feel like this. You know, it was like all of a sudden some new chemical, some new connection was made. And just, it was like, looking at the world in a different way, probably similar to the effect of drugs.
I think so.
Yeah. But those are special moments, man. I think you picked a good song to have that moment with. Because
Yeah, it is a good song. I got lucky it was on that tape.
Well, hey, man, thanks so much for sitting and doing this with me, man. Looking forward to the new music.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man. All right, that's the show. I want to thank Wolfgang Gartner so much for sitting down with me, a total stranger, just to do this podcast. It was a pleasure meeting you, man. I hope we cross paths again soon. And don't forget to grab his new single, Dubplate 99. It's coming out this Friday, September 8th on Kindergarten Records. What a great conversation. One of my favorites I've ever had on this show. And I hope you guys enjoyed it too. I hope you're leaving feeling inspired, feeling like you learned something about music, about creativity, about the industry, and about yourselves, guys. Because in the end of the day, I do this show for you. My name is Willie Joy. You can follow me on all social media at Willie Joy. Don't forget to hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. I want to hear from you guys. Don't forget to tweet at your favorite artists and tweet at me. Tell them they need to be a guest on Back to Back. We're rolling now. I'm feeling good. We got some great guests lined up for the rest of the month. And that's it. I love you guys. Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.